What does the globe claim?
That there's 15 degrees an hour deflection as Earth rotates underneath as a separate non-inertial turning reference frame to induce drift in the form of balls seeming to go through a curved motion through a goalpost as Earth rotates beneath them as a separate reference frame. The effect is well known. It's taught in schools. It's called Coriolis effect. Of course, if it was actually the case that she understood what Coriolis effect was, that's 15 degrees an hour claimed to be induced by a turning Earth, then Earth would be turning underneath aeroplanes. Not that Becky understands this Coriolis deflection for us to actually attack the actual claim, because she doesn't understand it and has just violated it. But if she was claiming it, which she's not, she's a heretic, then she'd also have us pointing out that that would mean Earth was turning underneath aeroplanes, shortening their flight times when travelling west, because Earth would be turning underneath them at 15 degrees an hour for us to see the apparent deflection claimed to be induced in footballs.
I was just going to say the Coriolis effect shows that those motions aren't happening either. You know, like the R value, she's presupposing to put things into motion, and then she'll describe it as us from a non-inertial turning reference frame. We've debunked all of that. None of that's happening.
Right on.
So let's say Tom Cruise is on that spacewalk.
He isn't. He's lying. If Tom Cruise starts to assert at any point that he's been out to outer space and walked in a sky vacuum, I'll be calling Tom Cruise a liar and debunking Tom Cruise personally. Simultaneously also debunking all of his assertions within his religion that's a spin-off of heliocentrism. So I will be debunking Scientology as a faith at its heart of heliocentrism should Tom Cruise lie about being in an outer space sky vacuum in violation of natural law. So Tom better not suggest it, because then he becomes a fish in our pond, lying about sky vacuums that he hasn't walked in.
And I guess this question's a little bit like another thing I don't understand, which is like...
Yeah, go ahead.
Point out that he described her book as a dizzying, was it her book? A dizzying journey through whatever the heliocentric nonsense. Dizzy is, that was the word I couldn't come up with for to describe her, was it yesterday?
Why, when you jump on a train, why doesn't the train continue? Why do you go with the train or whatever? If he's gone on that spacewalk, why hasn't the Earth and the solar system and even our galaxy just gone straight past him? And he's like, oh, God, I'm on my own.
So this is a very good question. Tell me he's not a good journalist now. He's just asked about an actual globe Earth claim that is claimed to be real. So what he's asking is, does Earth have Coriolis effect? Because that's what he's just described. He's just described a non-inertial turning reference frame turning beneath an inertial reference frame and asked if the item in the inertial reference frame would appear to drift if you were watching it from the non-inertial, that's the turning reference frame. In other words, would he just whiz away? That's actually a globe Earth claim. It's Coriolis effect. Go on, whoever that was.
Yeah, her response is perfect. Immediately, very charmy, giggling, like, ha ha ha. Oh,
Yep,
look at how
she
cute I
laughed.
am.
Let's see how she does. This is one of those things that I'm really sharp on.
Well, thankfully, I don't know whether you'd argue about my use of the word thankfully. Thankfully, he's still tethered to the Earth system.
Excuse me? Did you just say tethered to the Earth system?
Yep.
So he's got a great big piece of rope to the ground, keeping him in the non-inertial turning reference frame. Because if not, you're about to debunk the second reference frame that is claimed to prove Earth spins, Becky. Let's see how this goes.
Through gravity. Right. So,
So did you say he's tethered to Earth through gravity? Oh, dear, Becky. Au contraire. Do we need Cox to correct you, dumbass? No, Becky. Now, let me quote Professor Brian Cox. If he outranks you, he's definitely more popular, but he's also correct about the heliocentric rhetoric in regards to gravity not being capable of tethering things because it is not a force. There isn't really a force of gravity at all. End quote, Professor Brian Cox. Maybe George Musa, Scientific American editor. Gravity is not a force. So how, Becky, was Tom tethered with something that isn't a force?
Talking about Einstein, a year earlier he had formulated his general theory of relativity, which postulates that gravity is not a force that propagates through space. You've said postulates that gravity is not a force. So could you just clarify that particular phrase for me?
So gravity is not a force. The idea of gravity as a force in the Newtonian sense of a kind of almost undefined entity that grabs things across space, that force concept becomes a problem. Maybe I should put it this way. When describing the workings of gravity, you shouldn't use force concepts. In other articles, I'm perfectly happy to describe, and I do describe gravity as a force, as I do describe electrical forces or strong force or things like this, even though depending on context, I might not use the force terminology.
You use the phrase which postulates that gravity is not a force that propagates through space-time. Focuses on the words there that gravity is not a force.
Gravity is not a force, but you can think of it as a force.
You've said gravity is not a force.
Well, gravity is not a force.
Furthermore, if he's tethered to Earth with gravity, why is it that Neil deGrasse Tyson says that footballs drift through goalposts very specifically because they are not tethered to the Earth, to demonstrate a second reference frame turning beneath the football and causing the ball to seem like it curves through the goal? That's Coriolis effect, a second reference frame. You're now saying he's tethered to Earth in its system. So not a second reference frame then, Becky. This is going to get trimmed out. Becky's debunked Earth turn because she says there's a non-force force that you can think of as a force that creates a single reference frame. Tethered. Right, Becky? So not drifting at 15 degrees an hour then, like the football in Neil deGrasse Tyson's example.
There's that damn rotation of the Earth.
Yeah, because the Earth will then bring it back to the right for you.
Because that's very much not tethered and claimed to be proving Earth spins because it drifts, in line with the question you were just asked. But you're saying no drift, tethered, so no second reference frame proving we're spinning then, Becky? Oh dear. Maybe you should have learned what Coriolis deflection was before you told this man that there's no second reference frame proving we spin.
You know, he...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah? What, a non-force force that you can think of as a force, Andrew Gold? Why would you be nodding along with this? Oh, yeah? Well, obviously there's a force of bending pseudo-Riemannian force space-time that you've just spent the last 10 minutes discussing, and it's imagination that you had to go through to be producing spaghettification effects. This bending space-time that had you spaghettified is now tethering Tom to the ground. Oh, yeah. Clever wizard. Just done a real number on you, mate. Got you nodding along real nicely. Yeah, just a wizard. Now, what was the female equivalent? Witch. Yeah, a witch. She cast a spell on you. Now you're nodding. Tether like a rope, holding him to the ground. All right, you just agreed with that. Why? Critical thought much?
Even if he pushes himself away from the International Space Station, for example, that's still tied to the Earth.
Tied, like with rope? Non-force force that you can think of as a force like a rope tying him to the ground?
Gravity is not a force.
You're using words that reify a force from a 4D space-time that isn't a force.
It's pull of gravity, it's in...
Pull? No pull. Not really a force of gravity at all, end quote, Cox. Gravity is not a force, end quote, Musa. Part of this aren't you getting, Becky? You just catch all examples that debunk Earth turn with forces holding and tethering things that are tied to Earth. What, with an imaginary rope? The imaginary 4D space-time rope? That's not a force? Is that what's tethering him and tying him? You clown? Why are you making this shit up, Becky? Do you not know what Coriolis is? What an embarrassment. Second reference frame's supposed to be in effect. What about the ball drifting through the goal, Becky? Was that tethered? So you've debunked Tyson now, have you, Becky? Going to put your words next to Neil deGrasse Tyson's as he tells you about how Earth turned underneath the ball, only for you to completely contradict it in every single respect. So Earth not turning under the football, right, Becky? Tethered. No drift. What the hell's Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about, I ask myself. Nah, there's just no Earth turn. No art to claim there's Earth turn, no measurements to depict from Earth curve horizons, all bollocks. But here you are sat in contradiction of the High Priest, Tyson. Oh dear, Becky, you're going to get in trouble for this. Debunking Earth turn by saying things are tethered and not drifting at 15 degrees an hour. Sound familiar? 15 degrees an hour of Earth turn, drift, balls drifting through goalposts. Were they tethered, Becky?
Orbit around the Earth. It's essentially in free fall. It's just that the Earth keeps falling away from it.
That's just a begging the question fallacy. Nothing's falling around Earth. There is no orbits. Your assumption of it required an R value.
So it just makes a circle, if that makes sense.
If you can beg the question, because I've just told you that's what it does. No, we don't beg the question of orbits here, Becky. Definitely not.
So it's on like this perfect free fall to take it.
Yeah, just keep reaffirming the begging the question fallacy so he understands and nods along after you've said it 3 times. Yeah. Great wizardry. My bad. Great witchcraft.
That contradicts their claim of Coriolis effect, because he can't be falling around, but that means that he's the one moving and not the globe Earth. He would have to either be stationary and the globe Earth rotate underneath him, or he would have to be fixed to a point over the globe Earth, and him and the globe Earth both move at one time. They're the orbits. They're the 2 types of orbits.
Yeah, she doesn't understand Coriolis deflection.
She doesn't know the model. She just harps on with a lot of rubbish.
Yeah, she doesn't understand the model. She doesn't understand the Coriolis deflection and the 2 separate reference frames that are asserted. She doesn't understand any of it. She's making this shit up. I mean, it's bad enough that you come up with these stories that have come from Einstein, but when you start deviating off the path of heliocentric nonsense, that's when I'll get really furious with you, Becky. You're just a pretender clown. You don't even understand your own bloody religion. There's Coriolis deflection claimed in globe Earth, Becky. You stupid idiot. So you're going to bullshit your audience about what heliocentrism isn't now? After making up the stories in line with Einstein, now you're going to bullshit about your shit that doesn't sit in line with globe Earth claims of 15 degrees an hour drift? What an outrage. Neil deGrasse Tyson will not be happy. I'm going to call you stupid. That's ignorance. You are ignorant of the 15 degrees an hour drift that is claimed to be caused by Earth turning beneath things. 2 reference frames, inertial and non-inertial. Earth claimed to be the non-inertial turning reference frame, inducing Coriolis effect. That's drift, them drifting apart at 15 degrees an hour, according to the globe claim. You're saying they're tethered and tied. Well, you're just thick. Let me correct you about your incorrect assertions about what the globe doesn't do. It's claimed to have 15 degrees an hour drift. That's stuff drifting apart as a consequence of 2 reference frames. Hello?
Right. And how is gravity supposed to tether something anyway? That's
not
like
a force.
A new function I've never heard described.
It's not a
before.
force, so she doesn't understand what non-forces can't do. In this case, tether things. In violation of Coriolis claims on a globe Earth, proving that we spin. Yeah, she's in direct contradiction of that.
Bit all the time. So it's still completely tied to the Earth, hence why he doesn't go shooting.
Did I hear the word heresy? That's correct. She's a heretic.
Anti-flat earther.
Yeah. In years gone by, Becky, if you went against the church, you'd have been burnt at the stake as a witch for going against the globe Earth religion. I mean, back then it was obviously under a different title and a different control structure that told people about what the sky was with angels and shit. Meanwhile, you're telling them about bending space-time and spaghettification in black holes in tiny dots that are millions of miles wide. Yeah, you're just a witch at this point because you're a heretic. Because you're telling people no drift, no 15 degrees an hour Coriolis effect to see here, all tethered with a non-force. So you're a witch, and in years gone by you'd have been burnt at the stake for being a witch. But for your heresy. Okay, witch?
Should I just point out something? Sorry, go on, Ted.
Yeah, she just doubled down again and said he's tied down to the Earth. What is the globe claim?
That there's 15 degrees an hour deflection as Earth rotates underneath as a separate non-inertial turning reference frame to induce drift in the form of balls seeming to go through a curved motion through a goalpost as Earth rotates beneath them as a separate reference frame. The effect is well known. It's taught in schools. It's called Coriolis effect. Of course, if it was actually the case that she understood what Coriolis effect was, that's 15 degrees an hour, claimed to be induced by a turning Earth, then Earth would be turning underneath aeroplanes. Not that Becky understands this Coriolis deflection for us to actually attack the actual claim, because she doesn't understand it and has just violated it. But if she was claiming it, which she's not, she's a heretic, then she'd also have us pointing out that that would mean Earth was turning underneath aeroplanes, shortening their flight times when travelling west, because Earth would be turning underneath them at 15 degrees an hour for us to see the apparent deflection claimed to be induced in footballs. Well, planes also leave the ground like footballs leave them, and we can see them and observe them in the separate reference frame the ball's supposed to be in. So we'd be turning underneath them, massively reducing flight times when travelling west. That doesn't happen. There is no separate Earth turning underneath anything. Meanwhile, even if there was, she doesn't understand that, has gone against it by saying things are tethered to the Earth in a similar, same, or what did she say about the system that it was in? No, Becky, you are wrong.
No, Nathan, please go to Master D and show the picture of what an astronaut is really tethered to.
Like, how can, yeah, but like, even if she said like tethered in some way, right? No, she invoked gravity as the cause of tethering. Well, if that were the case, then nothing would ever deviate. Is she saying that Neil deGrasse Tyson's a liar when he's told about the football that just because of slight Coriolis deviation hit the goal? Is she just saying straight out loud that he's a liar?
It seems by consequence, yes. That's why I've had a massive go at her, because she's not sitting in line with the heliocentric rhetoric. And I don't know about this picture from the deep submersion tanks. You know, yes, this is what a tether looks like. Okay, so we know what a tether is. It's not gravity.
Well, in their world, this is not in the deep submersive tank. This is in above Earth. So she's saying that it's like being tethered to the Earth. But even if you believe this nonsense, it's tethered to the so-called ISS in the second law of thermodynamics violation. So, I mean, everything is off from this person.
Yep. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is not a heretic. She is.
It is a weird one.
Well,
it's like, you know, like all these chickens.
Let me just point out something here. Is it not very strange that heliocentrism has suddenly put its arm around Scientology? I know Scientology was its dodgy cousin, but it's put its arm around Scientology and is now promoting Tom Cruise. I mean, why does heliocentrism suddenly feel like they need to do that?
Because they're one of the same thing.
Because they're brothers.
Because they're the same thing.
Right.
I know they're the same thing, but up until now, they haven't done that. Scientology has been this kind of dodgy, kind of outsider group that has beliefs about space and different things. And I know it's all part of heliocentrism, but
oh, I see what you're doing. I know, I've got you. Follow. Hold on, Brian's putting something down, and I want to pick it up. Yeah, I agree, Brian. If you're watching this and you're an anti-flat earther, now's really the ideal time to actually get in on the heliocentric religion. You know, before it, gets, overpopulated with people deserting the globe Earth because it isn't one. You know, if you still want to be part of that, there'll only be one way into that. You know, your dying belief will just be labelled Scientology. What a name. Scientology. How appropriate.
I take a little different viewpoint, but on the same tone of Brian, though. I think it's the other way around. They need Maverick to help them out because they're dying.
Well, that's part of what I'm saying as well. It's like, why did they suddenly need Tom Cruise, who was a very public figure and been in lots of movies, and Scientology? Why did they suddenly need this?
Because they need popularity. Because Tom Cruise.
I think Brian's got a point he actually wants to make, and I've stepped on him, and now you are, Almin. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Nathan. Yeah, because Scientology gives a more complete outcome. If you look at what it is, it has a more complete philosophy to it. So it's like they're going to use Scientology against us, like in some way. It's like, boy,
Helio,
go on.
Has got no, pick on what he's saying, I think, pick up on what he's saying. It's got no spirituality. There's nothing in heliocentrism that deals with your soul. Scientology does. It allows you to stay in that comfortable place, but recognize there is something other than physicality. But fundamentally with Scientology, And it was a little bit what we was chatting about the other day, and maybe Tenth could mention this, how what we're seeing is, as people, it was the same with the Mormons, this introduction of heliocentrism into spiritual text. The Scientology is a great example, and if Tenth could maybe pull up the Mormon statements, you'll see here, Nathan, that into spiritual text, they're introducing the concept of planets, something that doesn't exist in scripture, but within the Book of Mormon, that exists, and also rotation of the earth. So its fixedness is no longer accepted. In fact, it's the opposite. And you can start to see this inbleeding in divisions of Christianity, or in offshoots of Christianity, like Mormonism, where the heliocentric religion has been pumped into its scripture.
Yeah, you nailed it, Adam. That was exactly it. I couldn't put my finger on it exactly, but that was exactly it. What has Flat Earth done? Just before Tent brings forward this piece of information, what has Flat Earth done? Besides anything geometric or physics-based, it's turned a lot of people, and admittedly by these people, who were atheists into believers in a creator. They now believe and know there is a creator, because now they know that this place was created. So they're created. So there is a creator. So consequently, now it's a battle for your spiritual beliefs. That's why I think they're bringing in this Scientology. I predict they're going to start creeping this in more and more, and it's going to become a normality as opposed to an outsider group. Oh, that's strange and shady. I have enough said anyway. Thank you.
With that, I'll say if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this extended live show now, this is where we bid you farewell. So another massive thank you to all of you smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, and all that good stuff. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on either Premiering stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.